You've been lying to me all along. Those were the words I heard at exactly 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday morning as I walked into the living room of my childhood home on Maple Street in Dayton, Ohio, a place that smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh brewed coffee that my mom always made at 6:30 sharp. I froze in disbelief, clutching the $1 $275 check I had painstakingly saved over the last 3 months from delivering newspapers. At 5 a.m. every weekday since June of last year, hoping to finally show my parents that I could be trusted with even small responsibilities. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of what she just said. The contrast between my dedication and her cruelty hit me like the icy winter wind that swept through the cracked window panes. I had spent exactly 12 hours each week after school and 6 hours every Saturday morning running errands, walking dogs, and babysitting neighbors' kids to save that money to buy a gift for her 50th birthday. And this was a reception I got you ever. Spent hours thinking about someone counting every penny, sacrificing every Saturday afternoon for their happiness, only to hear words dripping with contempt in a tone so cold it made the vintage clock above the fireplace tick louder than usual. You ever wondered if all the late nights organizing your allowance and meticulously planning surprises meant anything at all? I remember standing there gripping the check, remembering the feel of the glossy paper, the crisp texture, and the slight scent of ink, knowing it represented 3 months of effort, and all I got back was suspicion. I saw her arms cross the way she always did when she was annoyed, and the glare that could stop any conversation dead in its tracks. I heard my father shuffling behind her, muttering something about kids nowadays and shaking his head, but his words were muffled by my own racing thoughts. The living room smelled like cinnamon from the candles my mom lit every evening, and the subtle sweetness of my father's aftershave mixed with the faint musk of old carpet. I could feel my pulse in my temples and the uneven beating of my heart as my mind screamed for logic. In a logical situation, the chair my mother sat on creaked under her weight, and the sunlight streaming through the half-open blinds illuminated the dust floating in golden streaks across the room, making it look like a scene from a 1980s family drama. I felt like every step I took in that house, every chore, every sacrifice, every lesson I had learned from childhood was now meaningless. I tried to speak, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I just wanted to show you that I care. She looked at me with a smirk that turned my stomach inside out and said, "Careful what you think is care, young man, because I've been watching you more than you know." The words pierced deeper than any slap, and for a moment I thought I might collapse on the patterned couch, the one with the red and blue quilt my grandmother had sewn in 1978. I thought about the 15 minutes I had meticulously planned to surprise her with breakfast in bed, only to have it derailed by this revelation. My mind raced, trying to remember the times I come home early from school to help with dinner, or stayed late organizing the garage to make her happy. The countless sacrifices I had made were now painted as manipulation in her eyes. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who often walked her poodle past the window, must have sensed attention, because I saw her pause and peer through the lace curtain. Eyes wide and concerned, I could hear the distant echo of a school bus stopping at the corner of Maple and Oak Streets, its brakes squealing, a reminder that the world outside was moving on, oblivious to the chaos within my home. I clenched my fist, the leather of the steering wheel from my old bike bag under my arm pressing against my chest, as though holding on to sanity in the midst of betrayal. I remember thinking in that split second, in 15 minutes, everything will change, though I had no idea how or why. Just a flicker of determination sparked inside me. I could smell the coffee again, stronger this time, bitter and almost mocking, as if it weren't on the secret. They didn't know I had noticed the subtle signs for months. The unusual questions about my school schedule, the way my bedroom door seemed slightly ajar when I knew I had closed it, the glances exchanged when I mentioned plans with friends, the constant check-ins that were never about concern but control. Every whisper, every step, every look from them had been carefully orchestrated, and I had been blind until now. As I stood there, my heart pounding, my ears ringing with the cruel words, I realized that this was bigger than money or birthday gifts. This was a test of character, patience, of every moral fiber I had spent 18 years cultivating. Have you ever been watched without knowing it? I whispered to myself, the words trembling on my lips, but I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. If you've ever felt that gut punch of betrayal when the person who raised you questions your very intentions, comment below and share your story, because what happens next will change everything. I remember growing up in Dayton, Ohio, on the corner of Maple and Oak Streets, a quiet neighborhood lined with brick houses and large oak trees that smelled of sap and wet leaves in the spring. My parents had worked tirelessly, my mom teaching second grade at Jefferson Elementary, earning $42, $357 a year, and my dad managing a small hardware store downtown, bringing home $53, $840. $6 a year. We were never rich, but we had enough to make ends meet and plenty of love. That's what I thought. At least I remember the summer of 1984 when I was 12 and spent every Saturday morning mowing lawns for neighbors. I had counted exactly 27 lawns by the end of August, earning $216 and some change, which I saved to buy my mom a set of silver teaspoons she had admired in the window of Granger's department store. I can still see the reflection of the sunlight on the polished silver, the way it gleamed like it was holding back a secret she would never know. I remember evenings sitting at the kitchen table while she prepared dinner, listening to the crackle of the old G stove and the sough from the refrigerator while she talked about her day, and I shared my homework answers. I had spent an hour memorizing multiplication tables so I could impress her just once and earn that approving nod that made all the difference. When I turned 16, I worked a part-time job at Bennett's grocery store from 3:30 p.m. until 9:15 p.m. every weekday. After school, my uniform itchy and stained with flour and spilled milk, I saved $1, $842 over 6 months to pay for driving lessons because my father refused to help with the cost. You need to learn responsibility, he would say, crossing his arms and tapping his polished brown shoes against the linoleum floor. I practiced parallel parking on empty streets at 7:30 a.m. before school, when the air was crisp and smelled faintly of gasoline from passing cars, and the sweet scent of morning dew on the grass. I remember the first time I bought my mom flowers for no reason other than to see her smile. The $24.99 bouquet of daisies from Walmart on Main Street in Dayton, held in my sweaty palms, trembling with nervous excitement. She looked at me over her glasses, the gold frames reflecting the morning sun, and said, "For me," with a voice that carried pride and love. I had never felt more alive than in that moment. Every sacrifice, every chore, every extra hour spent working felt justified. I spent countless afternoons cleaning the attic, with its musty smell of old cardboard boxes and mothballs, organized in my dad's vintage record collection of the Beatles and Fleetwood Mac from the 1960s, the faint smell of vinyl mixing with the dust, making me sneeze repeatedly just to earn a smile. "You're so careful," my dad would say, running his fingers over the edges of a record. "One day this care will take you far." I trusted them with every piece of myself, giving up my Saturday mornings for volunteering at the Senior Center baking cookies and arranging flowers for residents over 60, making exactly 45 arrangements each month, contributing $15 a week from my own allowance to buy materials because I wanted to help. I remember clearly the smell of cinnamon from the cookies, the warmth of the kitchen oven, and the laughter of the elderly ladies who called me handsome boy while I served them tea. The joy in my heart was pure. I thought we were a team of family working together in trust. Yet over the past 18 months, I had noticed subtle signs. Something was off. The small lies about where they had been, the pointed questions about my school schedule, the way my bedroom door was never really closed, even though I had double-checked the latch, the peculiar look they shared when I mentioned plans with friends at 4:00 p.m. Friday afternoons. These were small things at first easy to dismiss, yet they gnawed at me like the hum of a refrigerator late at night during the 1982 winter. When I was 10, I remember wrapping gifts for my grandmother for Christmas, carefully measuring ribbons and arranging them perfectly in her gift box. A set of glass ornaments I had purchased with $12 I had saved from chores and birthday money. She smiled faintly, as if sensing my efforts, yet unable to fully appreciate them. The smell of pine from the tree mixed with the chocolate from the candy canes lingering in the air, creating a memory etched forever in my mind. Yet even then, I started noticing subtle hints of disregard, small sighs when I mentioned my achievements, faintly muffled laughter when I asked for help, and the ever-present feeling that my actions were being scrutinized not for love, but for judgment. By the time I turned 18, I had saved $2,763 from 3 years of meticulous budgeting and part-time jobs to buy my first used car, a 1987 Ford Taurus light blue, with a cracked leather seat and a smell of gasoline and old upholstery. I felt proud of this achievement, yet every step I took toward independence was met with suspicion. Where are you going? Who will be there? Why do you need that? Money, my own parents asking questions that made me feel like a criminal rather than their child. I remember sitting on the hood of that car at 7. 5 p.m. watching the sunset over the rooftops of Dayton, feeling the breeze, and realizing that all my efforts, all my work, all my care had not bought me trust or respect. Yet my instincts told me something bigger was at play, something that had been brewing quietly behind the scenes for years. Wait until you see what happens next, I whispered to myself as I remembered the countless hours invested in love and sacrifice. If you've ever dedicated your life to someone and felt the sting of doubt from those you trusted most, imagine how it feels when every small act of care is met with suspicion. Stay tuned, because what happens next escalates everything. It started subtly, at first a glance, too long a question, too pointed a remark, as if my parents were testing me for something I had never done, yet every interaction felt like a trap. I remember one Wednesday afternoon at exactly 4:18 p.m. sitting at the kitchen table trying to finish my calculus homework, while the smell of toasted bread and melted butter filled the room. My mother leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and said, "Do you really think you can handle that on your own?" With a smirk that made my stomach twist like the knots I tied in my shoelaces at 7 a.m. that same morning trying to catch the bus to school. I wanted to answer politely, but firmly, "Mom, I've been doing this for months. I can handle it." Yet my voice caught in my throat, and I forced a nod instead. I tried to reason calmly, explaining step by step the formulas and proofs, hoping she would see my effort, yet she shook her head, sighing, and muttered, "Kids nowadays think they know everything." I felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping into my cheeks, the same feeling I remember from the summer of 1985, when I had dropped a tray of pies at the senior center, and all the ladies gasped in horror. While I apologized profusely, even then, I had learned to take responsibility gracefully. But this felt different. It was orchestrated, a controlled display of power over me. I remember another incident last November, precisely at 6:47 p.m., when I had been preparing my first Thanksgiving dinner in our small Dayton apartment. The oven smelled of roasting turkey and herbs, while the pumpkin pie I had baked with my own hands sat on the counter golden brown and steaming. My mother arrived unannounced with a tape recorder in hand, saying, "I want to hear exactly how you explain yourself in the kitchen." I felt my blood run cold and my hands trembled over the carving knife as I tried to serve the dinner with composure. My father, watching the doorway, arms folded the light from the chandelier, reflecting off his spectacles, and the room felt smaller, tighter, suffocating. I remember the way Mrs. Thompson, walking her poodle past our window, paused to stare, noticing the tension. Her hand covered her mouth in silent shock, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. I tried reasoning calmly, saying, "I just want to do this for everyone." And she snapped back, "You're too naive to understand responsibility." The words cutting deeper than any criticism I had faced before. My mother began questioning every move of mine, from how I folded the napkins to the exact time I took the turkey out of the oven. She timed me with her phone, ticking loudly, 6:56, 51, 6:52, each second a dagger twisting in my chest. My neighbor, Mr. Daniels, from 112 Maple Street, was walking by and stopped to watch through the front window, his eyes wide and hands gripping the railing, as he whispered, "Is that normal?" I realized in that moment that I wasn't just being tested, I was being humiliated in front of witnesses, and that thought fueled an anger I had never allowed to surface before. Another time in February, at precisely 3:33 p.m., I had returned from school carrying a 32-page report on local history that I had worked on for 3 weeks, the smell of ink and paper mixing with a faint scent of my lunch sandwich still lingering on my hands. I proudly placed it on the dining table, saying, "Look what I accomplished." My mother flicked through it briefly, eyes narrowing, and said, "This is sloppy and pointless. I don't see why anyone would care." I could feel my face heating up, my pride crushed in an instant, and my father shook his head, murmuring, "We warned you about wasting your time." The humiliation compounded when my cousin Jessica called later that evening from Cleveland, Ohio, and said she had overheard my parents laughing about how I was always trying to impress them and failing. The echoes of her voice haunted me as I realized my family had made my personal achievements a source of mockery. These incidents escalated until the line was crossed one Thursday morning at exactly 7:03 a.m. when I discovered my bedroom door ajar for the third consecutive week. I had double-checked it at 11:17 p.m. the previous night. The smell of my own laundry mingled with the faint odor of burnt toast from the downstairs toaster. I approached slowly and saw a small camera hidden among the stuffed animals on my bed, capturing every move. My private space violated, every boundary shattered. I knew then that patience had run out. I clenched my fist, a fabric of the quilt my grandmother had sewn in 1978 brushing against my palms, a texture, grounding me to sunlight, casting stripes across the hardwood floor, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. I realized that no amount of reasoning or pleading would stop this, and that something had to change. I remember whispering to myself, what would you do if your whole life was being observed without your consent? And in that moment, a calm resolve settled over the turmoil. Inside me, I could hear the soft creak of the staircase and knew my parents were watching, waiting, expecting me to break down. I didn't. Instead, I made a silent vow that the next steps I took would be calculated and deliberate, not for revenge, but for justice. I looked out the window at the familiar street lined with oak trees, the crisp February air smelling faintly of frost and car exhaust. I felt a shift inside me, the scales of humiliation beginning to tip, and I said quietly to Mrs. Thompson, who had stopped again outside, wait until you see what happens next. Because what was coming would change everything. And if you've ever been humiliated by someone you trusted, the pain of that betrayal is something you'll never forget. Stay with me, because the turning point is about to come. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, February 12th, precisely at 6:59 a.m., when I finally realized that everything I had endured, the subtle doubts, the pointed questions, the hidden cameras, the whispers and smirks, were not random or accidental, but a calculated orchestration meant to test me and break me. I sat on the edge of my bed in Dayton, Ohio, feeling the texture of the 1978 quilt my grandmother had sewn, brushing my fingers over frayed edges, the faint scent of mothballs and old fabric grounding me. In reality, as I thought back to every sacrifice I had made since the age of 12, mowing 27 lawns in the sweltering summer heat, earning $216 to buy gifts my mother barely acknowledged, every Saturday morning spent delivering newspapers at 5:00 a.m., feeling the crisp cold air cut through my pajamas and numb fingers, and every evening at Jefferson Elementary, helping with school projects while my mother graded papers nearby, the smell of chalk and linoleum filling the air. I realized that no longer could I rely on patience or hope for recognition. I needed a strategic approach, a plan that didn't rely on emotion, but precision. I remember the countless evenings researching the law at Dayton Public Library from 7:15 p.m. until closing at 9:45 p.m., reading through local statutes and understanding privacy rights, noting the exact code 35127 concerning unauthorized surveillance, and the fines up to $2,500 per violation. I had saved meticulous notes in a leather-bound notebook, the smell of ink and paper, making my pulse quicken with purpose. This was my power, hidden in plain sight, unnoticed by my parents for decades. The first step was awareness and clarity. I needed to fully document everything I had observed from February of last year onward. Noting time 7:42 a.m. the first morning, I heard the words, "You've been lying to me all along," to March 15, 3:33 p.m., when my calculus report was dismissed as pointless. Every camera found every suspicious glance cataloged with dates, times, and physical descriptions. I started creating a mental map of the living room, kitchen, and hallway of my parents' house, marking potential areas where they could be monitoring me, the creak of the floorboards near the staircase, the glare from the lamp on the hallway wall, and the angle of sunlight through the blinds all became critical data points. I realized I had been underestimated all these years, my meticulous nature and quiet determination hidden beneath politeness and respect now became my weapon. I began preparing silently for the response that would not be impulsive, but deliberate, calculating every step to ensure the revelation would be undeniable and absolute. I knew that confronting them too soon could backfire. So I rehearsed my reaction, speaking aloud in my bedroom with the 1987 Ford Taurus parked outside the window, serving as a reminder of my independence. "I will act with dignity," I whispered. "I will not react with anger, but with evidence and precision." The decision wasn't born of revenge. It was born of justice, born of the realization that my life and personal boundaries had been violated in the most intimate and cruel ways. I started coordinating small measures to reveal their actions discreetly, from recording timestamps to gathering corroborating witness accounts. Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor who had paused multiple times on Maple Street, and Mr. Daniels from 112 Maple Street, both had seen the tension. They didn't know it yet, but they would witness the turning point. I spent the afternoon at exactly 4:18 p.m. sitting in my small office, organizing documents, folders labeled by months, dates, and types of incidents, the smell of paper and ink filling the air, while the soft from the heater created a rhythm that matched the focus settling over me. I reviewed every interaction, analyzing the tone, the body language, the micro-expressions of my parents, noting exactly how many times my mother's eyebrow would twitch or my father's lips tightened, signaling that they were aware I had. Noticed their surveillance, I felt a calm resolve, as if a storm had passed and left a clear sky in its place. I remembered the winter of 1982, when I had faced my first challenge baking cookies at the senior center and failing spectacularly to flour on my nose and hands, sticky with sugar and eggs, yet learning that patience and preparation were my allies. I drew on that memory, now knowing that patience paired with precise action was the key to shifting the dynamic. I rehearsed mentally the conversation I would have, the questions I would ask, and the evidence I would reveal, the order of presentation, and the moments to pause to allow the weight of reality to sink. And I visualized the reactions, the shock, the silent acknowledgement that my parents had underestimated me for decades, and I felt the subtle thrill of empowerment rising through my chest in waves, warming my hands against the quilt as if the fabric itself was affirming my resolve that morning. As I walked downstairs past the smell of burnt toast from the toaster and the faint aroma of coffee that had been brewing since 6:30 a.m., I felt different, lighter, sharper. Every step calculated the creak of the floorboards under my weight, a reminder of every past humiliation and every calculated act of patience that had led me here. I glanced at the staircase, knowing they were watching, expecting me to falter. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered quietly to myself, "Wait until you see what happens next," because this was a calm before. The storm and the revelation of my hidden power was about to begin. If you've ever felt underestimated, ignored, or watched without consent, keep watching. Because the turning point isn't just about me, it's about reclaiming dignity and asserting control. It was 7:02 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, March 18th in Dayton, Ohio, when everything finally shifted. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt from the sudden rain outside, and the warm aroma of my father's aftershave mixed with the lingering scent of my mother's lemon polish. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks. Every folder, every note, every timestamp, every subtle camera angle cataloged meticulously for months now sat neatly stacked on the mahogany table. In the living room, I took a deep breath. The texture of the 1978 quilt under my fingers grounded me as I opened the first folder and said aloud, "Mom, Dad, I have something to show you." Their eyes narrowed in curiosity and mild annoyance. My mother leaned forward, crossing her arms, tapping her polished brown shoes on the hardwood floor, my father's spectacles glinting in the lamplight. "What is it now?" she said with a smirk that had haunted my dreams for months. I gestured calmly to the stack of documents and screenshots of camera footage from the living room, hallway, and even my bedroom, showing exact dates and times. February 12, 6:59 a.m., the camera hidden among the stuffed animals. March 15, 3:33 p.m., the calculus report dismissed as pointless. Each document was detailed, precise, and irrefutable with annotations, including witness observations. Mrs. Thompson at 8:07 a.m., walking her poodle past the window. Mr. Daniels from 112 Maple Street at 6:47 p.m., seeing my Thanksgiving dinner monitored and timestamps to the second. Each piece of evidence presented a pattern of deliberate surveillance and humiliation. I watched their expressions change, first confusion, then denial, and finally undeniable shock, as they realized the full extent of their actions. The softening of the heater filled the pauses between each revelation, while the rain tapping against the window created a rhythm that made every heartbeat in the room echo louder. I began walking them through each incident calmly and deliberately. You didn't just watch me, you timed every move and questioned every decision I made. I said, my voice steady, my hands resting lightly on the stack of papers. "Do you understand that this is a violation of my privacy and my trust?" My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand and continued. "I have documented everything with dates, times, and witnesses, even your conversations recorded in your own words over the past 18 months. My father shifted uneasily, the creak of the chair under him punctuating his discomfort. I could see the realization dawning on him that his attempt to control had been outmaneuvered by meticulous preparation and quiet observation. I revealed next the recordings of their own admissions of suspicion, captured over months, the subtle tones of disdain in their voices amplified by the clarity of the microphone, making every word undeniable. "I trusted you with my life, my efforts, my sacrifices, and you turned them into a show of mockery," I said slowly, emphasizing each word for maximum impact. "But what you didn't know is that I have been preparing for this for months, and now the truth is undeniable." The room was silent except for the rain and the faint ticking of the vintage clock above the fireplace, which suddenly felt like a drum counting the final moments of their control. I watched as my mother's smirk faltered, her eyes widening, and my father's jaw tightened, the realization that they had misjudged me completely etched on their faces. Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Daniels both watching discreetly from the front window. Could see the shift in atmosphere, their hands covering mouths and silent, all witnessing the exact moment power changed hands. I laid out the legal implications of potential fines and public embarrassment, detailing exactly how unauthorized surveillance violated Ohio Law Section 35127, punishable up to $2,500 per incident, multiplied by each documented occurrence to weight the law. Tangible in a room like the scent of the wet rain outside, mingling with old leather and ink. From my folders, I emphasized that the purpose of this revelation was revenge but accountability, and justice their attempts at manipulation and humiliation exposed in vivid detail. To both them and the witnesses who have been unknowingly present throughout the escalation, their arrogance had been met with precision and preparation, my voice calm and firm, each sentence a hammer striking the foundation of their control. The cameras, the questions, the hidden checks were not oversight, they were abuse of trust, and the evidence proves it. I saw them exchange glances, the magnitude of their errors sinking, and I felt a surge of vindication, an empowerment, the culmination of months of patience, planning, and strategic action. The soft glow of the lamp reflecting off the polished floors and highlighting the folders on the table felt almost like a spotlight on the stage where the truth had finally been performed, the realization that they had underestimated me for decades, and the sudden understanding of my capability to assert my rights and dignity was palpable in the room. The moment was transformative, every witness present absorbing the shift in dynamic, the subtle nods of acknowledgement, Mrs. Thompson, and Mr. Daniels giving silent validation to the justice unfolding. I leaned back, slightly the quilt beneath my hands, a reminder of grounding in history, and whispered quietly, "You didn't know I could see everything, and now you understand the consequences." The tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced with the weight of recognition and accountability. And if you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or watched without consent, remember that preparation, patience, and quiet empowerment can shift the balance of power in ways no one expects. Stay with me, because the consequences and justice come next. By 7:45 p.m. on that same rainy Wednesday, March 18th, in Dayton, Ohio, the atmosphere in the living room had shifted completely, the rain tapping against the window, sounding now like applause for the unveiling of truth, the lingering scent of lemon polish, and old leather mixing with the faint aroma of wet asphalt from the street outside, creating a tense yet electric energy. I had laid out every piece of evidence, from hidden cameras to recorded conversations, timestamps, witness accounts, and legal documentation, and now it was time for the consequences to unfold. My parents sat frozen, the weight of realization and exposure pressing down onto my mother's hands, shaking slightly as she gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table, my father's spectacles fogging from the rapid intake of breath and the tension of shame. I spoke clearly and deliberately. Because of your actions, you will be accountable, not just morally, but legally. Every documented instance of surveillance and humiliation is a violation of Ohio Law Section 35127, with fines up to $2,500 per occurrence. I could feel the gravity of each word settle in the room like the cold February air seeping through the slightly cracked window behind them. I continued presenting the evidence in chronological order, each document placed in front of them to see and touch the tactile impact of reality. Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Daniels, both watching discreetly from outside to the front window, nodded, subtly capturing the scene on there. Phones ready to corroborate every statement, the public witnesses amplifying the weight of justice in real time. I instructed my parents to review the documented instances of humiliation, the hidden cameras in my bedroom, the intrusive questions about school friends, a mockery of personal achievements, every moment cataloged meticulously in folders labeled with exact dates, times, and brief descriptions of actions and intentions. The smell of ink and paper mixing with the lingering scent of coffee created a tangible presence that could not be ignored. They began to shuffle papers nervously, the soft rustle, like whispers of guilt, echoing the room. I noticed a subtle rise of color in my mother's face, the heat of embarrassment spreading across her cheeks, my father's jaw unclenching slowly as he realized the irreversible exposure of their control attempts. I spoke calmly. In light of the evidence, I am initiating legal consultation, and reporting to ensure accountability is enforced. The words carrying both calm and unyielding authority, the sensation of empowerment flooding through me, grounding me, as the quilt my grandmother sewed in 1978 brushed against my fingers on the edge of the table. The witnesses outside began murmuring among themselves, Mrs. Thompson whispering, finally someone standing up, Mr. Daniels nodding in quiet approval, and I could see the change in the neighbors who had been watching the subtle tension on Maple Street dissipating as the scene unfolded publicly. The realization of their arrogance and abuse of trust was now visible to others, created an immediate reversal of power. My parents attempted to speak, but every word faltered as the weight of documentation, witnesses, and legal implications silenced them like the sudden hush after a storm. I guided them to the consequences step by step, each fine, each potential public exposure explained calmly, each camera, each intrusion, each instance of mockery is recorded and will be legally enforced if necessary. I could see the shift from disbelief to acknowledgement in their eyes as they finally grasped the magnitude of their misjudgment and abused their previous control, evaporated, instantly replaced with a palpable awareness of accountability. The same oak trees outside standing silently as witnesses to the transformation inside. I felt a quiet satisfaction in the hum of the heater and the rain, creating a rhythm that underscored the finality of justice in real time. I made sure the witnesses captured key moments, the subtle nods, the murmurs of recognition, the clear display of remorse and shock, all documented to prevent denial later. My voice remained calm, steady, deliberate. This is not revenge, it is accountability and reclaiming dignity. I could see the relief on my own face reflected in the sheen of my eyes in the lamplight and in the expressions of Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Daniels outside. The immediate consequences had restored not just my personal boundaries, but the perception of fairness and justice in the eyes of the witnesses. The subtle cheers of support muffled by glass, creating an emotional resonance that reinforced the transformation happening in real time. The public acknowledgement of their wrongdoing, the reversal control, and the undeniable exposure of their actions marked a permanent shift. I could feel the empowerment settling into my core, the culmination of patience, planning, and quiet assertion of rights crystallized in that room. And if you've ever been denied respect, monitored without consent, or humiliated by those who underestimated you, remember that meticulous documentation, calm assertiveness, and witness accountability can create immediate and irreversible justice. Stay with me, because the final transformation and reflection are coming next. As the rain finally subsided that evening in Dayton, Ohio, around 8:15 p.m., I sat quietly on the edge of my bed, feeling the familiar texture of the 1978 quilt my grandmother had sewn, brushing the frayed edges, and inhaling the faint scent of mothballs mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee from the kitchen downstairs. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, every sacrifice, every chore, every late night spent saving $1.275 delivering newspapers and mowing lawns since I was 12, every evening volunteering at the senior center, arranging exactly 45 floor arrangements each month, every calculus report dismissed as pointless, every hidden glance and whispered mockery cataloged meticulously in my mind and in my folders. I realized that the humiliation I endured, the surveillance, the distrust, was never a reflection of my worth, but of the insecurities and arrogance of those who underestimated me. And that clarity brought a profound sense of empowerment. I thought back to moments of nostalgia, the summer of 1980, for the smell of cut grass and wet earth, the golden sunlight reflecting on silver teaspoons I had bought for my mother with $216. I earned mowing 27 lawns every early morning, delivering newspapers in 5 a.m. frost, the smell of ink and paper at Jefferson Elementary, while helping students with homework. Every scent, sound, and texture now imprinted as proof that my dedication had always been real and that my worth was undeniable. I realized that transformation begins with recognition of injustice and the decision to act with dignity. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, cataloging evidence, timestamps, and witness observations, including Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Daniels on Maple Street, who had watched discreetly as justice unfolded in real time, their subtle nods and murmurs of support reaffirming that standing up for yourself can inspire others, silently witnessing change around them. I reflected on a lesson for anyone who has ever been underestimated, ignored, or surveilled without consent. That meticulous preparation, calm assertiveness, and strategic action can reclaim power and restore dignity, that life's challenges often disguise opportunities for empowerment, and that every act of patience and intelligence counts towards long-term transformation. I thought about the emotions swirling inside me: relief, vindication, pride, and a subtle sense of responsibility now that I had demonstrated what could be accomplished when injustice meets preparation. I Realized that my actions were not only for myself, but to create a ripple effect for anyone who has experienced humiliation or abuse, empowering them to recognize their own worth and the strength within to stand up and demand respect. I looked at the folders on mahogany table, the smell of ink and paper still strong, and whispered quietly to myself, never again will someone underestimate what I am capable of. I knew that this transformation was permanent, the internal shift in perspective, the reclaiming of personal boundaries, the empowerment to act with precision and integrity now etched into my character forever. I reached for my phone and thought about the people who might be watching, those who had experienced similar betrayals and injustices in their own lives, and realized it was time to encourage them to act with dignity and preparation. I spoke softly into the quiet room. If you've ever felt betrayed, ignored, or watched without consent, know that your voice matters, your actions matter, and your dignity is worth defending. I added in my mind the multiple ways to connect and inspire others. Leave a comment sharing your story. Subscribe to follow more journeys of empowerment. Hit the notification bell to stay informed. And share this with anyone who needs to see that standing up is possible. I closed my eyes and remembered the warmth of my grandmother's quilt, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of raindrops tapping the window, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the clarity and strength I had gained through adversity, I realized that true power is not about revenge or dominance, but about reclaiming control over your own life, asserting boundaries, and turning injustice into growth. I thought the future of my relationship with my parents now altered. Every interaction balanced with accountability and understanding, yet never again allowing humiliation or surveillance to dictate my sense of self. I smiled softly, whispering one final time, the past cannot be changed, but how you respond defines everything that comes next. And with that, the story closed, leaving a universal lesson for anyone watching that dignity, preparation, and courage can transform the most painful injustices into lasting empowerment. If you've been through anything similar, comment below, share your experience, inspire others, subscribe, and hit the bell so that more people can reclaim their power. And never forget the lesson that even when underestimated or surveilled, the courage to act with clarity and integrity can change everything.